everyone. Good afternoon. How are you? Good? I know it's close to lunchtime, so some of you maybe are hungry, waiting for the lunch break, tired. No? So before I start, I want to get an understanding of the people here, so I'm going to ask you a question. Please raise your hand if you are a designer, design manager, UX, UI. Keep your hands raised. Yeah, thank you. UX, UI, content, graphic. Okay, great. Now, the non-designers, can you raise your hand? So if you're an engineer, business owner. Okay. Some people didn't raise their hand for both questions, so I don't know what you do. But I want the non-designers to keep their hands raised, please. Okay, now I want the designers to look around. Look at the people who have their hands raised. These are the people that we as designers need to convince. We need to show the value of our work to them. We need to prove that we are bringing value, more revenue, we are saving costs from their organizations. And today I want to talk about how you can do that without losing your soul. Because trust me, the creative people, when we focus too much on the business, sometimes we lose a little bit of our soul in the process. I want to try something that I've tried with some audience in Barcelona. I don't know if it would work here, but let's give it a try. I want everyone to stand up, please, if you can. And make sure your hands are free, because we need them. Okay. Now I'm going to count to 3. And on the count of 3, I want you all to clap just once, okay? Wait. Ready? 1. 1. Guys. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Perfect, now you can sit. And you have to forgive me because there was absolutely no reason for doing that. I just wanted you to wake up and be more energized while you're listening to me. Sorry. And now that I have annoyed you enough, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Marzie. I go by the name MarziUXD. And I have 10 years of experience working in different startups across Europe and the UK from different stages. And then it's been 6 years now that I'm teaching design. I'm mentoring designers. And I started a design community online. I think at the moment we have around 14,000 members. And we do cohort-based programs, mentoring, and so on. And here, you can see a picture of my students. I just promised some of them that they would make it to this presentation, so I just wanted to get it out of the way. These are designers that work in different organizations around the world from different maturity levels, and they joined this program that I run for, first of all, improving their skills and then playing a more strategic role in their organizations. Usually they come sometimes with the problems that they are dealing with in their organization, and I team them up based on the time zone, seniority level, personality types. And then we work on different cases, and then they go ahead and they present it in their organizations, and they come back and report, and we try to iterate on that and work on it. Something I have noticed working with so many designers, and usually last time I counted, I think on average I have around 500 students per year. So through my students, I work with many organizations, and something I'm seeing, it's a pattern that I see all the time, is that most designers are amazing at what they do. Honestly, they know how to do research, they come up with great ideas, they have mastered Figma, they use AI tools, the visual presentation is just perfect. But somehow, when they're presenting their work, especially to the business people, the work doesn't land exactly the way it should. So the value of their work is underestimated. And then they come to me and they say, Marzie, I feel like they don't take design seriously in my organization. They don't value design. They don't ask me to do research. They just want me to design something beautiful. And I feel like all of these issues is because of one problem, and that's a language mismatch. So designers speak one language, business people speak another, and somehow it seems we haven't talked enough about how to bridge the gap between these two languages. Designers don't know very well the language of business, they don't speak it fluently, and the other way around. And here are some examples from my very own students. And by the way, the character with the glasses represents the designer here. I had one designer who worked on redesigning an onboarding that had so many issues, and she did a great job. But when she was presenting her work to the business stakeholders in her organization, the way she presented it was, this onboarding was too long, the users were frustrated, they had pain point A and B, and here's how we solved it. And she went on and she shared like her solutions and how she validated them, and then that was it. I wasn't in that meeting, but I'm pretty sure the business person in that meeting was probably thinking in that moment that, okay, that sounds great, but I don't understand how it impacts the Q4 objectives that we have, so let's move on to the next thing that probably is more important. And the next example is something I have seen many designers do. When it comes to design systems, usually the way they present it to business people is, we need a design system because we have so many inconsistencies in our product, and we need a shared visual language. And if we have a design system, if we invest in it, we will have an easier collaboration with the developers, it will be more efficient. Again, I think when a business person listens to this, they think, this sounds like a lot of work for both developers and designers, just to define colors and typography, and it doesn't really ship anything new to our customers. They're experiencing the same thing, right? The point here is none of these people are wrong. They're both right. It's just that they're speaking their own language. They don't understand each other's language. So for the designers here, I think something very important is that every time you're presenting your work, you answer one big question, and that is, what's the business case? Right? Now the question is, how do we do that? Well, it's easy. You try to access the data that you have in your organization, and then you translate it into the business language, and then you try to present it as revenue, as the costs that you're saving, right? No. It's not that easy. And I know this no may surprise some of you, but I know most of you here have heard about the ROI of design, how we can measure it and everything. Like, there are so many resources out there. But there's one problem with all those amazing resources out there. Most of them assume that the designers are working at Meta or Google, where they have access to all the data they need at a granular level. They have all the dashboards available, and all they need is to learn the language of business and just translate some data, right? It's not the case for many, many designers. So we have to have a reality check before talking about the ROI of design. And there are 3 scenarios I want to cover. 1, in many organizations, metrics aren't even tracked. These are early stage startups that are still working on the MVP. They have a list of features they want to ship. They don't really measure anything. So how can a designer go ahead and measure the ROI of design if there's no data available? Scenario number 2, metrics aren't communicated. Sometimes it's being tracked, but it's not accessible to designers. For a simple query run, you have to pass 3 layers of approval. So if it's not communicated, again, how can you measure the ROI of design? And next, metrics aren't measured on time, because maybe you are measuring the metrics and it's accessible, but the designers need a baseline, the before state, right, to compare it to the after state so they can measure what they're doing. But if it's not on time, then you cannot really use it. So the core message that I want to give here is that if you're a non-designer here and you expect the designers to show the value of their work, you should pause for a second and think if your organization is even ready to understand the value of design. If your organization is giving the tools that the designers need to be able to measure their impact. Because we all know design is valuable. If you're here, it's because you think design is valuable, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So design doesn't need to defend itself. Design needs maturity from the organizations to be able to show that impact and to make sure the impact is understood. Now, having worked through my students with different organizations, I have realized that we can group all the organizations maybe in 4 main maturity levels. I call it the design influence ladder. The first stage is decorative, and there are many designers who work at this stage. In these kind of organizations, design is only about aesthetics. The success metric is beautiful. So if your design is visually beautiful, you have already succeeded. And it's very subjective. It depends on your manager. If your manager thinks it's beautiful, that's it. You have achieved the goal of design in an organization like that. The next stage is experience-led. This is where most organizations are at. You focus on the user flow, you figure out what are the pain points, and you come up with some ideas, you validate the ideas, and so on. This is what most designers do, right? Next stage, measured. And at this stage, we can start talking about the ROI of design, not before that. Because when it's measured, when you have the data, you can start to talk about the impact, about what kind of metrics you're moving, right? And the next one, while if the organization has been in the measured state for a while, then you become strategic. This is when you can influence decisions, you can have your own budget, you can decide which direction the product should move on to, and you can say no to the dark patterns, right? You gain some influence. Now, you may notice that the sizes here are different. These sizes represent how common organizations at each stage are. So as you can see, most organizations are at stages 1 and 2, right? So I feel like every time we talk about ROI of design, there are some designers who get stressed, like, I don't know how to do it, because probably they are the stages 1 and 2. And then the other 2 stages, you see, they're not as common. Now, the question is, how do the organizations, designers at the stages 3 and 4 actually show the value? Let's learn from them, no? Because the aim is reaching to that level. There is this framework that I call the 3-metric cascade. What I have seen amazing designers do in these mature organizations is that they speak 3 languages fluently. Well, the first one is easy, it's the design language. We all speak that language. This is what designers track. The natural language we have is task completion rate, time on task, error rate. We can run a usability test, and we have that data, right? Now, some designers, as they get more senior, they become more fluent in the product language. Product language is what the product managers track. So this language is about feature adoption rate, daily active users, monthly active users, engagement, adoption, retention, right? And then we have the business language, which is what the stakeholders track, the executives track. And that's revenue, lifetime value, churn rate, support cost. And to simplify it even more for the designers here, the executives care about only 2 things: more money, cutting costs. So if you can translate your efforts into that, that's already enough. So in the mature organizations, designers speak these 3 languages fluently, and it's not just designers who speak the 3 languages. The business executives also speak the language of design. It's a 2-way relationship, you know? We shouldn't just put the weight on the shoulders of the designers. I'm gonna give you an example. I've seen an amazing designer working in a very mature organization, and she worked on a checkout flow. She did usability tests, and the result was showing that the task completion rate increased by 30%. But that's not how she presented it. When she was presenting to the product managers, she would lead with the product language. So she would convert it to conversion rate, because it's a checkout flow. So she was like, okay, she knew that she improved the task completion rate by 30%, but she said, oh, this redesign has resulted into 20% increase in the conversion rate. And when she wanted to present it to the business executives, she translated it into the business language, which is the monthly revenue. So she calculated what's the average value per order in that checkout flow, what are the daily attempts in the checkout flow, and then she was able to say, we have increased $200,000 of revenue this month. And that's like music to the ears of a business executive. So this is just an example. And then usually what I do is I go ahead with my students who are struggling with this topic, and we create a table that works for their organization to translate these languages. So if you're working in an e-commerce and the task completion rate of a checkout flow increases, it translates to conversion rate, it translates to revenue, and so on. I recommend you do this for your own organization. And the best way to do it is with the product managers, the closest product manager that you work with. Because product managers are in between the 2 languages, they kind of speak both languages well. So the attributions are not as linear as I'm showing here, but it's a good guideline to start learning these languages, right? Now, if you're a designer in an organization at the stage 1 or 2, I don't want you to be like, there's nothing I can do. I'm just gonna wait until my organization is mature. Because the lack of maturity doesn't mean lack of leverage, okay? You still can do things. So here's some of the things I have seen amazing designers do in the organizations at the stages 1 and 2 that help them. Step number 1, they define a baseline, no matter what. I mean, the least you can do, you run some usability tests, just measure the task completion rate, time on task, and write it down. That's the data. So start using it when you're presenting your work, and eventually that would help your organization to care more about these numbers and data. Next one is framing your work as risk reduction, okay? So if we cannot show what's the impact of the things we do, we can frame it as what's the risk of not doing it. So the cost of inaction, you know? So let's say you're designing a feature, you don't really know how much it's gonna impact the revenue, but you know that all the competitors have that feature. So you can frame it as, oh, if we don't have this feature, we will be behind and we can lose some market share, right? The weight of losing something is more than the pleasure of winning. So you can use that to our advantage. And next one, it's very important, sharing your wins publicly, even the smallest ones. So any changes that you make, it could be some positive feedback that you hear through like some user interviews, just share it. Make a habit of sharing it. Find opportunities in your organization to share. And then we can use proxy metrics. Proxy metrics are not perfect, but they help us to make decisions. For example, let's say you want to work on the adoption of a feature and you don't have any data related to that. What you can do is to go ahead and ask the customer support if they have any data related to tickets that are about that feature, you know? It's still some data, it's not perfect, but you can work with it. And this is my last slide. I'm good on time, that's great. I want to share a personal story. There was a time that I was obsessed with the business outcomes. I wanted to show the value of design. I wanted to impact. So I would listen carefully when they were planning the objectives of every quarter. And I remember we had a room in the office with the screens on the wall that were tracking the data live. I don't remember which metric it was, but I remember I was going in the office every day and just staring at this line, and I was hoping it would go up a bit so we can hit the target. And I was so burnt out. I remember I was talking to a colleague, and I was saying, I feel like we're slaves of this line. Like, we're all coming here, working 8 hours a day, just staring and like doing our best and hoping this line would go up a bit. It's meaningless, right? So I felt like by focusing too much on business, I'm selling out the users. Because I fell in love with the UX, and most of you probably feel the same way, because it's about the human experience. It's about delight, it's about users, right? So when you focus too much on business, you're like, that's not what I wanted to do. I don't want to care so much about business, about revenue, making rich people more rich, you know, I want to care about users. But as I was struggling so much with this line, one day my manager came to me and said, Marzie, since it's working, it's eventually going up, what do you think if we hire 2 more designers? Maybe if we have more resources, it would be better. And who would say no to that? I was like, yeah, great, let's hire more designers. So I hired 2 designers, 1 designer and 1 product researcher, and then we could do more in-depth research. We could understand the users more. We could also create a design system. We could consider accessibility. We could decide what needs to be built, even though we were just 3 designers in that organization. And the line actually hit the target, if you're wondering about how the story ends. And then I realized that I wasn't selling out designers. I was selling out the users. I was actually advocating for them. So by focusing so much on the business, I was actually advocating for the users. Right? I was creating a better experience for them at the end. So I think the designers need to shift the perspective and think about it that way. Like, if you're focused too much on business, it doesn't mean you're losing the core and the value of UX. You're actually doing your best to take care of the users. So if I want to have 2 main takeaways for the audience here, if you're a non-designer, the takeaway I want you to have is, before expecting designers to prove their value, ask yourself, is my organization mature enough to even understand that value? And what can I do to give the designers the tools they need to show that value? And if you're a designer, I want you to focus on 2 things. 1, pay attention to the language mismatch. Tomorrow when you go to work or next week. Focus on the language mismatch and try to figure out what are different languages. That could be a good starting point. And the second thing, I want all the designers here to think of and take away from this talk is just relax. Just relax. I think designers feel so pressured. We are already doing a difficult job, which is we are one of the few functions in an organization that are building something from nothing. There is nothing exists, and we have to bring it to life. We're creating something. It's already tough. So don't expect yourself to do everything perfectly. I think really we need to give this message to most designers that they just need to relax. So if you're working at organizations that are at maturity level 1 and 2, it's okay. It takes time. Maturity takes time. Just do the little bit you can, and eventually, hopefully, the organization will be more mature. Thank you.
Thank you, Marzie.
Can I get a sip of water?
Yes. We have a lot of questions.
Ooh.
I'll start with this one. As a mindset, if you think of a business and it underestimates the value of design, isn't it more of a management problem than a designer's problem? What do you think?
I mean, it's easy to go ahead and blame the management always, no? And as you step into management, one of the first things I learned and I was told was that it's always the manager's fault. So once you're the manager, it's always your fault. But I like to look at it from a different lens. I think every organization can be more mature. If you go ahead, that's the easy answer. Oh, the management has the problem, But my experience is try to engage in conversations with the business, Ask them what they want to achieve. What's the ultimate goal this quarter? How can I help? Do you think this will help? I think a lot of these issues will be solved through communication simply. So I understand there might be some cases that the management really doesn't want to care about design. But if they hired you, it's because they cared, I guess. Right?
Yeah, you're there for a reason.
Yeah.
But what kind of tips would you give to designers if you would have to sell a design system, for example? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, you can explain one thing that you can use if there's no data available. There are so many case studies and reports out there that you can go ahead and find that shows how much cost companies save by investing in a design system. You can use that to your advantage. Or you can always translate everything in terms of saving costs or bringing more money to the organization, okay? So one of the things you can do is using the reports that are out there. The other thing is, I think competitive analysis is a very good tool for designers in these scenarios. Go ahead and explain how the closest competition has an amazing design system, and if we don't have it, we will fall behind, and then our development time will be longer, and as a consequence, we'll lose money, So just frame it in a way that resonates with the people you're talking to, Right. I hope that answers the question. But if not, just reach out on LinkedIn, and I will try to explain it better.
Yes. Do you have any favorite books or courses, other than yours, that you would recommend design business communication improvement?
My course is the best. That's so. No, I'm joking. For business, let me think. Let me think about all the books and courses I have passed and see which one's the best. I love Joe Natali. By the way, I'm a self-taught designer, so I learned everything on my own through YouTube. I couldn't even put money in courses or boot camps. When you say self-taught, I was really learning through free resources. And Joe Natali was one of the ones I really liked. So I think his courses, he has a website that's called Give Good UX. And then I think his courses are also in Coursera or Udemy, and he has a masterclass for designers. And his perspective is always very he's focused on business, and I like it. So that's one thing I would suggest. Then for business impact, there are so many good books out there. Honestly, let me tell you something. I think that not just designers, but many people, we're so in love with resources. Right? When I do some courses and I announce that there's a PDF at the end that you can download, everyone gets super excited. They love to just download something or bookmark something, just have something. And then I know all of you have some PDFs and bookmarks that you never read. It's just there, right? So I think a lot of learning happens while you're doing the job. 60, 70% of what you learn is at the job. So I think we should remove our focus from like resources and books to actually doing things and trying and making a fool out of ourselves and making mistakes, and then we learn through the process. So the books are amazing, of course, but there should be a balance. So Joe Natoli is the one that I can recall right now.
Thank you. And one last question. What if I'm a designer and I feel like I'm withheld from the data to calculate the value of my design? Is there any way to imagine the value if I don't have actual numbers?
So you mean before the design is launched and you just want to get buy-in, right?
Yeah.
Again, frame it as cost of inaction, right? So here's what I think we should do. Here's the risk of not doing it, even though I don't know the impact. And then I think that PMs are really good friends of us in this topic. Like, go ahead and talk to your PM. They usually speak the business language fluently and they can help you out. And another thing is the qualitative data that we designers easily have access to. So we are not good with numbers, but when it comes to user feedback and understanding their feelings, we are more fluent and comfortable, right? So mix the two. If you have a little bit of data from even your usability test, you know, it's a simple data, just use it in combination with the qualitative data, and then you can present it in a way that's like a bit stronger for the business people. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Marzie, for making the design value shine for everyone.
Thank you.